Here we are. Welcome to a new episode of Foresight TV. I'm feeling a little bit discombobulated here. I was in Las Vegas for a conference, and I got back. My flight was just enough delayed that I got back into my home office about 5 minutes before we were supposed to go on. And is it Zeynep? Give me the pronunciation on your name.
Zeynep.
And of course I guess I should have known that you were from Turkey, but I fell in love with Turkey there, and so I wish I'd had a chance to have a conversation about that. But we're gonna jump right into it. Normally I do a little intro video, but because of mechanics, I don't actually have that available to us. I am just so excited to have you here. When I first read your book, Good Jobs Strategy, I got so excited. It still sits at the top of one of my very favorite books in the world. So why don't we start with an introduction with who you are and your passion and what you're focused on.
Thank you so much, Steve. First of all, it's very nice to be with you. Maybe I'll start with my mission and what I try to accomplish in my life, and then I'll go through how I try to do that through my work. So my mission is to both develop and spread knowledge on how companies can profitably transform bad jobs into good jobs. And by bad jobs, I mean bad jobs that pay too little wages, almost no benefits, very few opportunities for success and growth. So my mission is to help companies, create knowledge and transfer that knowledge to lots of companies so that they can transform these bad jobs into good jobs in a profitable way. And I try to accomplish that mission through different ways. So one is I'm a professor at MIT Sloan, so I teach and I do research. So I try to do research on quantifying the cost of bad jobs and the benefits of good jobs and how to accomplish creating good jobs. So part of it is research. The other part is to teach. I love teaching my MBA students, executive education students. So to teach and show my students that there is a different way to run a business. And here's how you do that using operations. And then the third way that I try to accomplish that mission is through the nonprofit Good Jobs Institute. So in 2017, I co-founded the nonprofit Good Jobs Institute, and our mission there is to help companies thrive by creating good jobs. And we work hand in hand with companies on how they can do better for their customers, employees, and investors at the same time.
So I'm going to tell you, I have a not very secret motive in talking to you besides just learning from you today, is I want to inspire you to explore how to make jobs for the senior living frontline workers to explore that. So you primarily, as I think I understand it, you've been primarily working in the retail sector. And I want to I know the work well, but for the audience, I want to have you just talk about some of the discoveries. I'm particularly fascinated by Quick Stop, is probably the one that I just sort of gets me most excited, but I'd like to have you start by talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, you're right. I did most of my research in retail, although now I'm expanding beyond retail, and the only qualifier is that I focus on low-wage industries. And they tend to be oftentimes services, although there are some manufacturing factories that are in that as well. So the conventional wisdom in retail, in lots of other service industries, is that in order to offer low prices to customers and good returns and profitability to shareholders, we must pay people as little as possible, offer as few benefits as possible, and operate with as few people as possible, right? So that's the conventional wisdom. And what I found in my research is that conventional wisdom is actually not accurate, because when companies operate in a context where they don't invest in their employees, then there are all sorts of operational problems, there are customer service problems, there are cost problems, and they find themselves in a vicious cycle of low employee investment, high turnover, low performance. And then I found that there were a bunch of companies that were simultaneously offering their customers the lowest prices, their shareholders amazing returns, and providing good jobs to their employees. So my work is initially my first book, the Good Job Strategy, was on how do they do that? What is their secret? Because you can't just pay more and expect high. Like it's an overall system. So I try to highlight in the book what are the elements of success so that you can create good jobs to employees, great returns to your shareholders, and low prices and awesome service to your customers as well. And I will say one other thing. I'm so delighted that you reached out, because your industry is one industry that I associate with the most humane industry, where what people do make a difference. And those of us who have parents who are coming to the age of where they might need some assistance, you think about, would I feel comfortable leaving my mom or dad in a place where she or he will be taken care of? So I would be delighted to share my work with this industry and inspire perhaps leaders and learn from them at the same time of what would it take to create good jobs and awesome care, human care for your industry.
So actually, I'm going to just jump into my industry first, because I think we can probably refer back. So I have had so many conversations with senior executives in the senior living community who say, I want to pay more money, but we need a certain number of people to be able to serve the food, to clean the building, to provide bathing and assistance with dressing and those kinds of things. And I just don't know how to pay them any more money without having to massively raise the price of what we're charging residents, and we're already pushing them to pay more money. And so there's a general belief that we can't, I think there's sort of an underlying belief that the industry can't be more efficient. And I'm not sure I even necessarily agree with all of that. I would argue all that, but I can't point to any examples where somebody said, I'm going to pay, instead of paying $15 an hour, I'm going to pay $25 an hour. And so I think the question is, how do we go figure this out?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair concern. And this is where we need a mindset change.
Okay.
I remember talking to, my business hero is Jim Sinegal, who co-founded Costco, which is one of the world's largest retailers. And when I asked them, how is it that you're able to pay workers, the median wage of a Costco worker is $25, and the median wage of a retail worker is $13? How is it that you're almost paying double the wages? Like help us understand that. And he started that from the beginning. And his answer was, and this is where the mindset shift I think is so important. He said, 70 cents of every dollar we spend, similar to your industry, is on people. So he says you put rent, you put everything together, utilities, everything, all our expenses. 70% is labor, 30% is everything else, right? So then he goes, if we don't do that well, then we're going to screw our business very badly. So let's think about what happens when you don't pay people well, right? So what there's so much research now that shows that when people don't make enough money to take care of themselves, they're constantly stressed, right? They have health problems, they have physical and mental health problems, they have their cognitive functioning gets lower, and their ability is lower on the job. They can't focus on the job, they can't do a good job, they have attendance problems, they have all sorts of other problems. And in every organization that we have worked with so far, low pay is one of the primary drivers of employee turnover. So if you pay people so little that they can't make enough money to take care of themselves, you're going to operate with high turnover. And when you operate with high turnover, what are some of the things that you can't do? Well, you can't hire the right people, because your managers, your executive directors, your department managers in your senior living facilities are constantly fighting fires. They're constantly fighting fires about who came in late, who didn't show up today, are we understaffed, Who do I have who can do this job? And they're constantly fighting fires. They don't have time to hire the right people. They don't have time to train them well. They don't have time to develop them well. And then, of course, what happens is the headquarters looks at this and says, people who work in our facilities are not that great. They don't work so hard. They're not very productive because they're set up not to work so hard. They may not be the right people, or they might not have the appropriate training. And then they say, let's take decisions away from them. Let's try to decide everything from the headquarters and tell them what programs they need to do, what things they should do with their residents. And then you have an environment where, the headquarters don't trust the front lines. They don't trust the front lines. And then the front lines look at this and say, hey, some of these decisions make no sense. And they don't trust the headquarters either. So you end up creating this entire system of mediocrity. And of course, who pays most for this mediocrity is both the employees and the customers.
Well, and so here's the other argument that people are going to make. Again, I'm not sure so if you look at Costco, you look at, well, let's just take Costco for a minute. So they're highly dependent on repeat business and people spending more money. One of the things that makes, at least we believe, that makes senior living very different is mostly a family will only ever within, a 20-year period of time will buy senior living one time, or maybe you'll have two parents where it could be twice, but that's about it. So repeat business doesn't seem to be as important. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, and I guess I have two thoughts on that. Repeat business may not be important. Of course, that doesn't mean that you should create a business that by design offers poor care, right? So that's, but here's, I'm not an expert in your industry, but perhaps I could give an example of a good jobs company from an industry that's similar to yours to see if it sparks anything. So I'm an operations management professor, and one company we love among operations management people is Shouldice Hospital in Canada, and they only do hernia surgeries. They specialize just in hernia, and they would like to hope that somebody who came in will never come back again. But
great example.
So because they want to be able to do the surgery right, and so you won't have the problem. So they don't have repeat customers. You don't have the customer coming back to you over and over again. But because they provide such good care at low prices, they have a long list of customers who want to go and have a surgery there. Their occupancy rate is, they're always occupied. And in fact, there's a waiting list. Like you have to wait for a while to be able to go there. So wouldn't it be wonderful in your industry if everybody wanted to come to you and they wouldn't say, oh my God, I wish my parents were someplace else, but this is the only option, right? So I would like to believe, that occupancy rate will be something that might drive. And then the costs that retailers experience when they don't invest in their workers, some of those costs probably happen in your context too. One of those costs is turnover. We work with companies to quantify the cost of turnover, and oftentimes they are surprised by how high those are. It could be, overtime. It could be your managers who you are paying a lot more money doing the frontline tasks because you don't have enough people, because people haven't showed up. So there are lots of hidden costs that oftentimes we underestimate, and then there's a ton of waste, of course. And then maybe sales is not the biggest drivers, but maybe occupancy rate might be a substitute for repeat purchases in your environment.
Well, so the other part of this that plays into this, and I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, how do I get you? Well, I'm going to back off. So for a second, I'm a big fan of leadership books, big fan of Adam Grant. I read your book a long time ago, and then I heard you on his podcast, and it's like, that's what inspired me to reach out to you to have you on today. But one of Adam's got this mantra that he studies how to make work not suck. I love that, but I'll be honest, sort of figuring out how to make work not suck for somebody who makes $80,000, $90,000, $100,000 a year when there are people out there whose jobs suck and they can't figure out whether or not they're going to be able to send their kid to summer camp because if they do that, then they can't pay their phone bill, seems like a more noble pursuit. And but it doesn't seem to be so sexy for most of the people who are doing research, which is what makes you so unique and so wonderful. And so I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, how do I get some senior living community to really engage you, or to you to say, I'm going to get with some of my students to go work on a senior living community? Because this could change the world. Because honestly, the people who work in our industry mostly don't. I mean, they love what I hear over and over again is, I love the residents, I hate the work, I am not crazy about the company I work for. And so where do we start?
You know, where do you start? That's a great question, not knowing where you are right now. But I would encourage executives in your industry to spend a lot of time in the front lines. Go visit the communities in which you serve the residents and see what's going on, see what's happening. Spend a whole day with a caregiver, shadow a caregiver. Try to get to learn about them and their work, and you'll have more empathy about the work and more appreciation for the work that happens in the front line. So maybe that's one place to start. And then when we work with companies, oftentimes we think about, okay, you need to invest in people, but if you just invest in people without changing the work, are you going to be able to make money? Because you're a patience person, and oftentimes, I hear from executives, yes, we have done that and it hasn't worked. Yes, we have increased staffing levels and it hasn't worked. So we talk about how do you create an operating system that leverages that investment in people. And it starts with, what is it that you offer to your residents, right? What is it that you offer and what is it that you don't offer? So we had some experience with executives from one senior living facility, for example. They were focused on lower acuity residents, right? So, but then once occupancy performance pressures started coming up, they're like, oh, maybe we're going to start getting level 5 residents too. What happens when you increase this offering like this? The complexity of the work increases. The lower acuity residents are not happy that higher acuity residents are now there, right? The customers themselves are not, because they don't want to be around people who are more sick than them. For the caregivers, the job is a lot more complicated. So overall, now you've created a system where people are not doing a good job and customers are not happy. So how do you think about what is it that you offer to your residents and what is it that you don't offer to your residents, and which residents do you have in your facilities? What programs, right? As you think about the range of services, what are some of the programs that are important and some of the programs that are not? Because if you can take work out, if you can reduce the workload from the frontline caregivers, that's one way to invest in the pay and hours, right? So oftentimes when we work with companies, one of the first things that we look at is, how do you increase investment in people, and how do you make the work, how do you reduce the workload? How do you reduce the variability in workload so that we can pay for the pay increases? And then, of course, there are so many, Good Job Strategy has a couple other things, which is, how do you cross-train so that people are always busy? They can move from one department to the other, not cross-train everybody to do everything, but cross-train so that you have flexibility. So you can, if you have 3 falls in one area or 3 residents who are having problems, you can get people from other departments who can come in to help. Another thing is, how do you standardize some of these processes and also empower people to make decisions? So it's a system, but we oftentimes start with how you're offering to the customer and invest in people.
You said something that on the surface of it seems very contradictory, and that is standardize and give people more autonomy. One of the things that I see in senior living communities a lot as they get bigger is that, and even in my own organization, I've experienced this. So it was me and a couple of people, and now we have 9 people. And as we have 9 people and we have more customers we're serving, it gets more complex. And so it becomes easy to say, we've got to have more meetings, we've got to have more systems. And yeah, what I see in particularly large senior living communities is that if I own a single building and it's full, I might have an operating margin of 50%. But when I own 10 buildings, then I've got to have these regional people, and they want to put rules in to standardize things. And so how do you actually create a system that works that makes people more efficient rather than just adds a cost burden and takes away the fun from work?
Yeah. Are you standardizing to control and make people inhuman, or are you standardizing to empower people, right? What I've learned from my colleagues at Toyota is standardization is actually liberating, because now I can get rid of all those mundane tasks. I don't have to think about them, but I can focus on the resident. I can focus on the customer and help solve their problems and create that human connection with them. So standardization, if it's done right, and it's a big if, because what I've seen in retail in different industries is if you create those standards hand in hand with frontline employees and they have a buy-in and they know why they have to do certain things that way, that's different than headquarters saying, you do this that way, you do that way. I don't have time to explain to you why. By the way, you're turning over so fast, I don't even need to explain to you, because next time it's going to be somebody else. So how you do the standardization also matters. But again, mindset shift in terms of standardized to empower, not standardized to control and crush dignity.
Okay, so I'm a senior living. I want to do a little bit of a role play here. I'm hoping I can inspire somebody to do this in real life. So I'm a senior living operator, and there are a couple of you who are watching this who I've had these conversations with before, and so you know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to name any names in public, but you are the people who should be talking to her. So anyway, so I reach out to you and I say, okay, I'm scared to death because all it feels like I'm going to do is increase costs, and I'm just barely breaking even anyway because of the pandemic and because we have huge labor pressures in the industry right now, as many of like restaurants do. That is just, it's scary time. But I'm going to give you a try. I want you to come into my organization and help me figure out if there's a way to do this differently. Where are you going to start with me?
Yeah, I think first, I wouldn't tell you to do anything differently. You are the one who knows your business, right? You are the one who operates that business, and your front lines probably have lots of the answers. So what I would say is, let's learn together. Let's learn together. Let's figure out what are some of the choices that you can make. What are some of the decisions that you can make to improve the customer experience and employee experience. So probably what I would say is, let's do a workshop. Let's commit to a 3-day workshop. And we invite a lot of people from your organization to this workshop. We spend time talking to the caregivers. We spend time shadowing them. We spend time understanding what's happening there. We spend time looking at pay data. So what percentage of your caregivers are not making a living wage, so that you can see it. And when you see those data, you can't unsee it. That's what we have realized as we work with companies. We can look at data in terms of what percentage of your managers have been promoted from within, your executive directors, your department managers, which is, again, an important ingredient of a good job. And then we have a workshop and we discuss first where you are with the right data, qualitative and quantitative. Talk about other companies that have been there. Let's talk about the good job strategy and how it applies to you. How can you see yourself doing this, right? Because it has to be you seeing yourself making these choices to create a higher productivity, higher contribution, and better experience. And then what would it take for you to get from A to B? Here are some of the organizations that have gone from A to B. So we would offer some case studies of companies that we have either worked with or studies that have moved from point A to point B One is a call center, one is a retailer. So what can you learn from here, and where do you start? What are some of the high leverage things that you can do? So that's probably the conversation that we would have with leaders in your organization if they were interested in exploring how to create good jobs and exceptional service and human-centered service for your residents.
I love this. So I think there's this sort of sense that one of the things that you talk about in the book a lot is creating efficiencies. And I think there's this sort of sense that there are not many efficiencies to be created. And yet I suspect if I go back to a retail, you look at Costco versus Walmart, since you talk about that, right? And I suspect if I were to go to the Walmart people, they'd say, oh, we're doing it as efficiently as we possibly can. And, or maybe Sam's Club would be a better example, right? Sam's Club would be more comparable. And yet Costco said, well, maybe they're actually wrong. Maybe we can be more efficient, right? That's kind of how it works, right?
I love that you gave Sam's Club as an example, because this is a company I spent a lot of time with, and we did Good Jobs Institute. During the last couple of years, they made wage investments that are $5 to $7 an hour. $5 to $7 an hour from a base of $15 an hour. So a meat cutter that was making $15 an hour can now be making $22 an hour. And they made these wage investments in a way that didn't cost them anything. Because what did they do? They focused and simplified. They said, what are we asking people to do that they're not supposed to be doing? So they realized, you know what, we don't need to have a photo center in our stores, because that's not why customers come to us. So let's remove that out. There are some tasks that our people are doing that are very inefficient. Let's make them more efficient. And they simplified the work. They simplified the offering to the customer, and that in part paid for some of those wage increases. They standardized their processes. They started using better technology. So I love that you gave Sam's Club as an example, which is a great comparison to Costco, because I would talk about Costco, and would people say, yeah, you talk about Costco, but can Sam's Club become Costco? Yeah, they can. They are on the journey. And you know what? They're winning with their customers. That is the beauty of doing this. They're not only reducing their turnover and offering better jobs to their employees, but they're winning with their customers and their investors, not surprisingly.
So this is really an interesting conversation to me, because one of the things that I don't think gets done much, but what would seem to make sense to me, would be actually to involve the residents in this conversation and say to them, and if we're talking about, say, dementia care or assisted living, where the medical, the care part is larger, where you've got more family involvement, it would be really interesting to have a conversation with them and actually say, are there things that we do today that you actually don't care about very much if we made it go away, and could save you money, or could give the people who are caring for your mom or dad a better living wage? Or what are those things out there that we could do away with? And it may very well be that there'd be things.
Oh, there will be things. If you ask them, there will be things. And your residents might tell you, and your caregivers might tell you. But if you have the mindset to ask them, right? If you have that view that we're going to explore this and see what really creates value and what doesn't create value. And I bet that in the memory care, your residents would care so much about consistency of care. I bet they don't like seeing different people from 1 month to the other. I bet that they would really care about the experience and the connection that they would make with their caregiver. So what can you do to be able to create that? What are some of the things that you might give up to be able to pay that caregiver well, so that they can stay with you and they can create that great experience for your residents?
Yeah, I think this is the conversation the industry needs to have. I'll give you an example that I see in every modern senior living community, even one that's more or less is full. They'll have an executive director who's overall essentially manages the entire campus. And then they'll have at least one more person who does the sales and marketing. And yet, if you were to go back 30 or 40 years to more a mom and pop look at senior living, you'd see communities that were that big where they wouldn't have a marketing director. The executive director would also be doing the sales. And that's a 60, 70, 80,000, maybe $100,000 a year job that maybe you don't really need. I'm sorry for all you sales and marketing people who are watching this, because I know I got a lot of you here, but I just think that it's something, those are the kinds of things we need to be putting on the table.
Yeah, I don't know. And in fact, when I work with companies, they are oftentimes very nervous about this focus and simplify, because the moment they hear that, they say, okay, that's going to cost me my job, so I'm not going to volunteer in this.
Right.
Yeah. So I would be very hesitant to say, oh, marketing people. But what I would say is, how the Costco, I'll give you the example from Costco, they don't spend any money on advertising. Why? Because their advertising is their customers and their employees. There's word of mouth. They have such great service that they keep coming back. So where do you put in your efforts? Where do you put in your efforts is a good question to explore. And how do we redeploy those people to be able to create a better experience for the residents, so that like the Shouldice Hospital, where there is no marketing, but there's a long list of people who want to come because they've heard from others what an awesome service that they're getting at a hospital for hernia surgery.
Well, so in this, I think maybe we're beginning to unlock the key, right? So imagine that we have a senior living community that says, or a whole organization that says, I'm going to go unlock the good job strategy. I'm going to figure out how to do that. And so now all of a sudden, instead of operating at 90% occupancy pre-pandemic, I'm operating at 98, 99% occupancy, and I've got a waiting list. And instead of spending all this time trying to recruit, I've got people coming who want to come to work here because I'm paying more money and I'm treating people better. And I have this word of mouth, so I don't have to pay. We use a lot of third-party referrals that really adds to the cost of moving a resident in. And so I don't. So speaking, this would be outside your knowledge, but I don't pay a place for mom any more referral fees, because I've actually got people lined up because families are telling each other about how great an experience they're having. What would that look like? How much money would that give you to create better than a living wage or at least a living wage for your people?
Without knowing the details, it will be hard to tell. But wouldn't you like to work at this place?
Yeah.
Would you like to be the ED of this place? Wouldn't you like to be the department manager? And as an executive who is running, at a higher level at the headquarters, wouldn't you be proud that you are creating this type of outcome for your residents? So I met wonderful people from your industry, and I bet that they would rather be operating this way than the other way. So if we have this exploration stage to see what are the possibilities, right? Could we create the Costco of senior living, where we can pay so much more to our caregivers so that they stay with us, so that our department managers and our executive directors are not fighting fires, and they can constantly think about how to improve the business, how to reduce the waste, how to create better care, and how to create that word of mouth. Wouldn't that be wonderful? And how do we do that? I can't tell you how to do that. You will be able to explore this and figure this out in your own setting.
So I love this. We're out of time. I'm afraid I could do this for another half an hour. I would just say to our industry, to me, it feels like the biggest challenge we have is believing that this is possible to do it differently. And then if you believe that it's possible, that it might be possible, then we need some outside help. We need somebody like you, somebody who can come in and help us rethink this. But I know the executives in this industry well. With maybe one or two exceptions, everybody has a heart for people, and they're not doing it just to make lots and lots of money. And then, of course, by the way, if you did all that and you felt great about it, you would make lots of money. And that's pretty consistently true, right?
Absolutely. You would make a lot of money and you would stay in business for a long time. It wouldn't be like until the next alternative, next better thing comes along. The other thing is you have to believe in the system, and you have to believe in the ability and motivation of an ordinary person to do extraordinary work, because I think sometimes what gets in the way is that we are so removed from the front lines that we don't believe in their ability and motivation. We don't understand that these people are not able to work well because they have 2 other jobs, because they haven't slept last night, because they can't put food on the table. And we see attendance problems, we see turnover problems, we see not focusing on the work, and say, you know what, they have low ability. And that's the belief that we have to change. That's the belief that we have to believe in the ability and motivation of the ordinary people to provide extraordinary performance. That is very possible to do.
Yep, it is. So I don't know whether you can see the chats or not. There's a little box up in the upper right-hand side, and you can, because somebody chatted to in Turkish that I can't read. So if you want to hit that chat box up there. So I agree with you 100%. I just think that the opportunity could be transformative. And I believe that one of the tectonic shifts we'd actually see in the industry in doing this is we would really be taken seriously as the place that's going to transform aging now that people are living longer, rather than just being the place of last resort, no matter how luxurious. And so that's the opportunity. Thank you very much. How do people find you, reach you? I'll drop some links into your institute is the best way, probably.
Yeah, I mean, you can get a lot of information about Good Job Strategy from goodjobsinstitute.org. We have videos, we have lots of resources. You don't have to buy the book. Like, you can learn a lot about the Good Job Strategy. Yeah. The available materials. We offer diagnostics. So that's one way. And zton@mit.edu is my email.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I'm sorry we had sort of the confusion with technology and me being late, because I don't like doing that. But this has been an amazing conversation. I really do appreciate it. And with that, to the audience, I'm going to say goodbye. You can actually hang on for a second.